Kim loved life.
Her dream was to have a family, but her dream ended up being her nightmare.
Found her, she's in the bed, dead. Oh my God, no, not Kim.
It looked as if somebody had been sleeping on the couch.
There might have been somebody staying in that house with Kim.
The back door at the house had been shattered.
We see her on video withdrawing $420 from her bank account. So what happened to the money?
This is suspicious. And now we have the mystery taxi guy that keeps coming and going at the house.
There was a confrontation. It was a guy named Carl.
Who's Carl? Where did Carl come from? The confession was crucial.
Right now, you're blowing buku smoke up my ass.
Failing was not an option.
911 emergency.
Yes, this is Brenda Brown. I need the Smyrna Police Department, please.
Okay.
Found her, she's in the bed, dead.
Okay. Don't touch anything.
Please, we come through the back gate and the window was broken and she's laying in the bed. Oh my God, no, not Kim, not Kim. Please hurry.
Listen, they're on their way, okay?
I had not been able to get in touch with Kim for a few days. Kim and I talk usually 2 or 3 times a day. The last time that anybody heard from her was about 2 o'clock on Sunday. And then we found her on Friday. I just went to pieces.
Upon my arrival, the aunt and uncle of the deceased were there. They were very distraught, very upset. They gave positive identification of the deceased as being their niece, Kim Allen. I entered through the front door of the home with other officers. We went into the bedroom where there was a body that was covered up with a blanket.
I did think that at first she was asleep with a blanket on her.
We pulled the blanket down enough to be able to reveal that there was a female lying there.
We noticed immediately that she was laying on the bed in this position, almost like she was clasping her hands and then they kind of fell apart. And we noticed some silver residue on her left wrist and then silver residue on her cheek. Didn't initially know what that was.
The skin on her body was marbling, which gave us the impression that she had probably been there for several days.
But we had noticed there were some superficial cuts in her neck.
And there was bleeding from the eyes, which might be indicative of somebody suffocating or smothering.
The house didn't look like there was any kind of big struggle that took place. It just looked like a home that was lived in.
It looked as if somebody had been sleeping on the couch. I walked into the kitchen. There was a Coke bottle that was tipped over that had tobacco or snuff spit in it. We found out that Miss Allen didn't chew tobacco.
So that kind of indicated that there might have been somebody staying in that house with Kim.
I didn't know if somebody had stayed with her at that particular time. We didn't know anything.
There was a cloth with blood on it in the living room on the couch, but more like maybe you cut your hand or something, not like there was a life-threatening injury that had taken place. On top of that, her phone was nowhere to be found.
But her wallet and her purse were still on scene. However, there wasn't any cash in the wallet.
I observed that a window had actually been broken.
It looked like the back door had been shattered from the inside out because there's a lot more glass outside than there was inside.
There was a lot of questions that you'd have. Was this a random act, or was this somebody who wanted to make it look like a robbery to cover up the actual killing? We're leaning towards it's a homicide investigation.
When the hearse pulled out of the driveway, I just sat down in the middle of the road. I just could not believe it had happened, not to my Kim.
When I see the grief and I feel that coming off of that family, that is what gets me, and Brenda did that to me.
From the day she was born, she was like the daughter I never had.
She had a lot of personality. So we called her the selfie queen. She loved taking selfies, and she loved her dogs. They were her babies. Kim was very loving. She thought about others more than she thought about herself most of the time. She always looked for the goodness in people. Even if they weren't necessarily all good, she would find good things, and hopefully she would be able to help them get better.
She was one of a kind. I cried and cried and cried, to be honest with you. I thought Larry had been there.
When Kim and Larry first got together, the world revolved around Larry. Kim wanted a family more than anything. He had 2 daughters, so it was immediate family.
It wasn't long after that that they got married.
She was smiling, and he was treating her well, so we were happy for her. You know, at some point, their relationship took a turn.
And then we started noticing the bruises.
Her dream was to have a family, but her dream ended up being her nightmare.
We learned then that there was an actual open case against Kim's estranged husband, Larry, and that she had recently testified against him in a domestic assault and a rape.
I think the incident happened right around a year prior. She had actually returned home from a night out with the girls or something. Larry Allen got upset about it.
Larry just did not trust women at all.
Larry started beating her and raped her pretty brutally.
Then he called the ambulance, and at this time, she was bleeding everywhere.
Miss Allen filed a police report accusing Mr. Allen of raping her. There were statements taken and tape recorded from both of the individuals.
I wanted to ask you a few questions, okay?
What
happened last night?
I just wish he hadn't even called you guys.
You're in bad shape.
My jaw hurts.
What do you remember about any of that?
My husband, Larry, was accusing me of being out doing stuff that I didn't do. And he lost.
He was pretty brutal to her in ways that, as a woman, are just atrocious.
So after they take Kim to the hospital, the police come get Larry and talked with him.
Right now, I need to get your side of the story.
She's at the hospital right now?
She is, yeah.
I want a DNA run on her, showing that some other was up in that tonight and caused all the bleeding and all that stuff. Hoping this will wake her ass up, because I'm done.
We're also going to be charging you with rape. So I want to see if there's anything else you want to say about that before we go on.
That's bullshit. My statement is bullshit.
Listening to Mr. Allen's interview tape, you think, this is evil personified.
Larry had to leave their residence, and we keep waiting for Larry's trial. He was a free man at the time. He was out on bond. So he lived with his mom and dad down the street, just a few houses down. Kim was terrified.
The case was ultimately set for a preliminary hearing. And it took a lot of courage for her to take the witness stand and tell the judge in a courtroom full of people what had happened to her.
Ms. Allen, you know the defendant in this case, obviously Lawrence Eugene Allen, is that correct?
Yes.
Take a deep breath and tell the court what happened.
I mean, he came in and was yelling at me and he hit me several times around the head. And I remember thinking, he just broke my jaw.
It was horrible to know that my Kim had went through so much pain.
After a preliminary hearing in Tennessee, the next step is sometimes as much as 6 months to go to the grand jury.
She was determined that he wasn't going to hurt her ever again. But a week after she went to court, she is deceased. And of course, we thought it was Larry.
First thing that comes to mind for me was that Larry might have come and taken some retaliation out on her after the testimony she gave in court at the preliminary hearing, because he had the motivation to do it. Larry was facing 15 to 20 years if he was convicted of doing the aggravated domestic.
We knew that Larry had access to that house, even though he was court ordered to be away from there and should not have been there. At that point, we have a clear suspect. We needed to find him and we needed to talk to him.
He's just not really making any effort to come forward.
We're thinking this is suspicious.
And then a couple of people saw a guy here leaving in a taxi.
He was screaming that, "I'll kill us both."
He said he had witnessed something horrible.
When you saw her Monday, was she alive?
This might be our big break. Kim Allen was found deceased in her bedroom. She had recently separated from her husband, Lawrence Allen. Kim actually testified against Larry the week prior in a preliminary hearing. The case had been bound over to the grand jury because he had raped her pretty brutally. So he may be a viable suspect in this homicide.
His parents actually lived just a few houses down the road from Kim, and they came up to the scene to check and see what was going on. They told us that Larry was living on a houseboat. They didn't know where it was. They said that he'd dropped his work truck and trailer off on Friday of last week, and they had not seen him since then.
We've got people that are attempting to find out where the houseboat may be that Larry's on.
We know that he's been communicating with the family. They've told him that Kim is deceased, and he's just not really making any effort to come forward and tell us what he knows.
The fact that Mr. Allen is missing, you start thinking this is suspicious. This is very much suspicious.
I just knew. We all knew. It was Larry. She was just finding her footing. And she was trying to focus on things like bettering herself or going to school. And she was just starting to come into who she was as a woman. And the world missed out on what her potential might be.
In her home office, she had posters and writings reminding her that she was somebody important. She was really making a huge effort to remind herself that she was better than what she had been treated. I remember praying that I would get the strength to get closure for her family and get justice for Kim, because she did not deserve what happened to her. It felt like the clock was ticking, and we needed to hurry up and find out what had happened to her and who was responsible.
We need to find out as close as possible the last time that she was seen alive, and then build a timeline to the time that we found her.
At this point, we had people out trying to locate Larry, but then at the same time, you've got officers and detectives talking to just about everybody in the neighborhood to see what they've seen.
We had a couple of people that said, well, we saw a guy here on and off during the week leaving in a taxi.
And so we said, hey, can you describe the person? Have you seen that person there before? And they say they never seen him before.
And he did not meet the description of Larry. He was kind of scraggly.
Thin white male, wearing blue jeans, a t-shirt, and a baseball cap.
So we had Mr. Allen, who we had had on our radar, and now we have the mystery taxi guy that keeps coming and going at the house.
If she was in a new relationship, all of her friends would know. We didn't know about this guy that is staying at her house.
We absolutely have to figure out who this is.
So we kind of transitioned into looking for digital evidence. We did a subpoena for Kim's banking information, trying to see when the last time her banking card has been used.
We find that she had been to a corner market and she had made a cash withdrawal from an ATM. And we were able to get video that Sunday when we see her on video, withdrawing $420 from her bank account. We learned was the last time that anybody had seen her. Earlier in the day, the video from the corner market showed a slight portion of the parking lot, and you could see a vehicle that was the color of Kim's, and a white male gets out of the passenger side. He comes into the store and he buys a case of beer and some cigarettes, and he uses her card. And when we got the transaction slip from it, he just signed it Kim. and got back in the passenger side of the vehicle, and you can see it drive away. So there is a great possibility that the person that's on this video knows something.
Also, he matches a description of the mysterious taxi guy.
This guy has been in her life probably more recently than anybody else. We need to find him.
The next big thing was we got a cell phone that's missing. So we did a subpoena for the information for the cell phone to see when's the last phone call.
The last call that was made was to Tracee Merritt. And she told us that her brother, Eric Ellis, had called her from that number. Detective Neighbors and I went to go speak with her almost immediately to see what she could tell us about where he was and why he had that phone. We were speaking with Tracee, and she identified the person in the video using Kim's bank card as her brother Eric.
And then she told us a little bit about Eric. He had a problem keeping a job. She also told us that Kim met him at one of the bars and that she offered him a place to stay for a couple of weeks until he could get a job and get on his feet.
And I think that inviting him into the home was just kind of a natural thing for her.
Just to kind of help that young man out.
Eric's sister seemed a bit on edge, and when Detective Neighbors and I told her that we were investigating a possible homicide, oh no, shock was written all over her. And then she tells us, well, Eric says that he had witnessed something horrible in the last week, and he couldn't tell me about it. And then I took him to the rescue mission, and that's where he is now. The first thing we thought of was, what can he tell us? We need to get to him to find out what he saw.
Kim had been murdered after she took the stand to testify against her husband, Larry.
She was afraid of testifying. I think Kim wanted everybody to think she was okay. Kim wanted everybody to think she was strong and she was moving on with life. She knew that Larry could get to her, and she was terrified.
I don't know how you can get anybody more on your radar based off of their history. And then we have this unknown white male that was coming back and forth in the house. We now have identified Eric Ellis, and so we had to eliminate somebody.
Tracee Merritt told us that her brother, Eric Ellis, had been staying on and off with Kim, and so we wanted to talk to Eric first because it seemed an easier elimination. He may be able to give us some fuel that we can use to pin Larry down. Tracee had taken Eric to the rescue mission in Nashville, so we decided that we would take off and go to Nashville, make contact with him, and see what he could tell us.
Once we arrived at the mission, he was standing out behind the building. He just stuck out his hand and said, nice to meet you. Didn't ask questions why we were there or why we were looking for him. We can already confirm he is, in fact, with her in the video from the corner market.
We were really wanting to see what kind of information he could provide us. We ended up telling him that Kim had passed, and he was, you know, okay, yeah, I'll talk to you.
Both of us kind of had the same impression that maybe he doesn't really know anything. He's kind of nonchalant about coming back to the police department and talking about Miss Allen.
At that point, he was considered strictly a witness. And we put him in one of the interview rooms and just kind of took a moment to watch him and see what his demeanor might be.
During that initial time in the interview room, he's comfortable chewing tobacco. And I'm thinking about the bottle that has the tobacco in it at the crime scene itself. That might have indicated that he had been staying at the residence. So his story appeared to be honest and truthful at that point.
Okay, sorry about that.
No, you're fine.
Okay. I'm kind of stepping in and doing the interview and interrogation for Detective Gossett. That frees her up. If I missed something that should have been asked that wasn't, she's very quick to be able to step in there. We start questioning him, basically just letting Mr. Ellis tell us a story about his time with Miss Allen.
I haven't known her that long. She was pretty cool, nice person. She opened up to me and I opened up to her. She had been real nervous. She just kept mentioning Larry.
He said that Kim had been upset because of the testimony against Larry. She was afraid that there might be some type of retaliation because Larry was looking at spending up to 20 years in prison for that violent attack on her.
She had told me some prior incidents where she was at a bar where he drug her out by the back of her hair. He was screaming that, "I'll kill us both."
So in the back of your mind, you have that name, Larry Allen, but you don't want tunnel vision.
I don't know if he physically did anything to her recently, or she's had a run into him.
Let me clarify again real quick just what I want, okay? From Friday night, from the time you met up with Kim, okay? Through today when you talked to us.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
Friday night, definitely drinking. I know we went back to her place.
Okay.
And I went to sleep on the couch because that's normally where I slept at. Saturday, we've been to Nashville. We bar hopped a little bit. She did say that she was going to meet up with a friend of hers that she knew for a while. I know it was a guy, but I don't know his name, never got it. I left from her and was just roaming around all night. So I figured she did meet up with like whoever she was talking about. And I haven't seen her since after that, all of that.
But we got great video from the convenience store showing him using her car the next day.
I'm kind of soaking in everything that he's telling me to eventually question him on any inconsistencies.
She probably did meet up with that person.
Okay.
And they either stayed downtown or they went back to their place.
Okay, so Saturday night you didn't come back to her place at all?
No.
You stayed in Nashville?
No, sir.
He's not telling me the truth.
Why is he not going directly to the answer of this? That's kind of started ringing some bells too, that maybe he just wasn't wanting to tell us everything.
You know what, enough's enough. So I kind of get a little more assertive at that time. So you haven't seen her since Saturday? So how were you in her car in Smyrna at 11:09 a.m. on Sunday?
On Sunday?
Mm-hmm.
I don't recall being in her car on Sunday.
You recall going to the store and using her credit card?
Yes, that's when I told you when she, yes,
On
I'm
Sunday?
sorry. Yes, sorry. That's when, I came back down here for a little bit and then yeah, I remember that. I forgot about that and I'm sorry. I'm not lying to you.
One of the things that I noticed is the amount of detail that he's telling me, as long as he wants to recall it. He kind of got that screwed kind of look. And what do I say now?
I'm a little freaked out because one, I didn't do nothing wrong.
But right now, you're telling me a lot of
I know, I'm
circle
trying to remember everything.
He knows way more than he's telling us. Maybe Eric had witnessed some type of retaliation from Larry.
Now, if something happened and you were at the house and a mistake happened, then that's what we need to know. We can deal with mistakes. But somebody that's going to lie to us about them, that tells us that somebody's trying to hide something.
Okay, I'll tell you.
Okay, yeah.
Let's start over from Saturday.
We had the aha moment. This might be our big break. He's going to tell us what happened and how it happened.
So I walked back down towards Second.
When we're interviewing Eric about Kim's death, his story started to change.
So you haven't seen her since Saturday?
I haven't seen her since.
Eric's sister received a call from him basically stating that he had witnessed something horrible while he was staying with Kimberly. Our primary focus was Larry, their ex-husband. They had just been to court on that the week prior. They found Kimberly deceased.
We're thinking he's gonna tell us that he saw Larry killing her.
It was a screaming battle. It was a guy named Carl. I want to say it was Miller, Carl Miller. I know Larry didn't do anything.
Who's Carl? Where did Carl come from?
I don't know how she knows him. They were just screaming and yelling at each other. Like Sunday, Monday morning, like early morning. He just told me, get the f out of there. I called the taxi and I left.
It kind of started looking like maybe Eric Ellis might have been a little more involved than what we thought that he would have been. So now we had to find Carl.
I knew probably something bad had happened, but I didn't know what.
Okay, I'm gonna ask you this one time.
Yes,
okay?
go ahead.
And I want you to be perfectly honest with me. When you saw her Monday, before you left there, was she alive? Don't lie to me either.
I know she was drugged up. He was crushing some type of pills. I seen a residue on a counter. I watched him put the powder in a cup.
Okay.
And then I watched him put Diet Dr. Pepper on top of it.
Eric was just giving great details about the crime scene, and we had our crime scene techs at Kim's house, and they were texting us back and forth as we were interviewing him.
They relayed to us the information about pills being crushed and put in her drinks. A lot of prescription bottles were located, and we did find pill residue crushed up on the kitchen counter.
And so you get them to tell you a story, and then hopefully you just get them talking and making these certain admissions.
I got scared. I called the taxi.
How'd you call the taxi?
She had given me her cell phone to hold on to.
Okay. So what'd you do with her phone?
After I got rid of it because I didn't know what the hell was going on.
A common technique that we use is called identify and verify. Mr. Ellis's story just wasn't making logical sense. Detective Neighbors is catching those inconsistencies. And so what you do is you wait, and then you go back and clear up that inconsistency.
Well, I gotta be honest with you, it's still bugging me that you take her phone and just decide to throw it away. Because if you don't know that she's dead, you're not gonna take your friend's phone and throw it in the trash, because she's gonna want her phone back.
I threw it away in the trash can.
Where?
Downtown.
When he tossed her phone in the trash, he probably knows at the very least that she was dead.
At that time, honestly, speaking truthfully to you, I didn't know she was dead then.
When somebody uses a phrase like truthfully, honestly, or says I swear on the Bible, that usually tells me that they're lying. I'm wondering if he's concocting the Carl Miller story. So I kind of get a little more assertive at that time, more of a in-your-face approach, hoping that would level him with us on what actually happened. Sometimes some things happen, okay? Some things are accidents, okay? If you were there, y'all were having sex, you were getting drunk, you were getting stoned, she died, then that's what we need to know, okay?
I just knew that he told me I need to leave, and I left. Honestly, that's what I did.
Okay.
And I left.
At this point, I'm thinking about taking a break and just getting out of the room for a minute. Give us a couple of minutes and I'll be back and talk to you again, okay?
I need to go try to find Carl Miller if he exists. So I run through dispatch, I go back to the databases that we have, and I look for Carl Miller. There is none, just doesn't exist.
Often in interviews, what you'll have is somebody that will start deflecting. And by deflecting, what they will do is they will bring in a made-up person. And what they do is they start almost living through that person. They will say, this person did it. And really, it's just a defense mechanism that we have.
We need to dig a little deeper as into why he's trying to divert to Carl. Okay. I'm gonna try this one more time, okay? And I'm gonna give you a chance to be honest with me, okay? This third person bullshit is bullshit. That's all it is, bullshit. There is no Carl Miller in Smyrna or Rutherford County. You're gonna have to start being honest with me.
I'm being honest right now.
No, you're not. You keep blowing smoke up my butt.
But I'm being honest with you. I'm freaking the out because I did not kill this woman. I didn't poison this woman. I didn't do shit.
You and her, the only two in the house at that time.
At that time, yes.
Okay.
Eric admitted to being alone in the house with Kim. When we start getting those little pieces, it's just, you know, it might be a small thing, but those start adding up.
At this point, we confront him with the ATM video. So you were there Sunday night, correct, at her house? Okay. Whose picture are we going to see at the ATM at 9 that night?
On which night?
Sunday night.
Sunday night.
Mm-hmm.
The only person that we could see in that car was Kim. But we were pretty sure that from the timeline that we had so far that he had been with her.
But it could be that Eric was in the back seat, but it didn't show him.
I'll be honest with you. She went to the ATM and got the cash out. I think it was like $420 or something like that. I was with her when she went to the bank.
There wasn't any cash that we found in the house. So what happened to the money?
I decided to ask him what he was holding to her throat when they went to the bank. I thought that Eric had taken the $420. What were you holding to her neck?
I don't hold nothing.
At the bank?
We knew that there was that stab wound in her neck.
Oh, that's, yeah, that's what she had. I went home.
Come on.
I didn't have a knife or nothing.
It was enough to shake him. Just kind of out of the blue, he says, I didn't hold that knife to her throat. Wow, what are you gonna tell us?
You were with her when she went to the bank, right?
Yes, sir.
And she got the money out, okay? What were you holding to her neck?
I would hold.
Come on, come on.
I didn't have no knife or nothing.
At this point in the interview, we realized that he's just going to tell us one deceptive story after another. So I'm going to try to push him over the edge to actually tell the whole story.
As we're trying to pull the story about the knife and the ATM stuff out, he had been wanting some water.
We decided that Detective Anderson is going to come in the room, bring Mr. Ellis a glass of water, and say it was a match.
Come on, be honest with me now.
Hey, thank you.
No?
Hey, it's a match.
The hope was that he would think that we had retrieved the knife and were able to match DNA to her.
Okay, you want to try this again?
She asked me, I didn't cut her, she asked me to hold it, and I did.
She asked you to hold what?
She gave me a knife.
Okay. She tell you to hold it up to her neck?
I didn't hold it to her neck, I just kind of held it like this.
What? Nobody wants you to hold a knife to their throat and take you to the bank.
She said, I'm gonna loan you $40, and she took out $420. And I didn't need $400.
So you took $420 from her?
You go to the bank and Kimberly draws $420. However, there's no money left in Kimberly Allen's purse.
Boom, then robbery's a motive. So let's start building on it.
When we set out to talk with Eric, we were kind of anticipating that he may have information that would lead us more to Larry. And instead, Eric turned out to be our suspect.
Let me tell you something, okay? Right now, you're blowing buku spoke up my ass, okay?
So I finally get a little bit agitated, kind of get in his face.
Now, if you want to keep this story up, we can play all night long. But we all know what happened, don't we?
Honestly, the truth, I was so up drunk, I don't remember. There was a struggle when we got back, not like a fight.
Between you and her?
She was stumbling, and I went to catch her when I did, and it stuck in, and I freaked the out.
What'd you do with the knife?
I threw it away.
Where?
Downtown.
Where?
In the parking garage.
He told me that the knife was in the trash can at the bottom of the stairwell on the blue level of that parking garage at the Hilton.
We were able to recover actually 2 knives. One of them we were able to match other knives that were in a butcher block from the house.
Okay, at this point, we know that this is probably our guy.
I'm thinking Eric Ellis was the person that committed this homicide.
After she fell on it, I got a towel to hold it right there. And I said, Kim, I'm so sorry. I said, I don't know what the hell I'm thinking. And I don't remember a whole lot because I had blacked out. Not like blacked out, because I did. And I know I'm going to jail, am I right?
He's given me bits and pieces of information, bits and pieces about how she fell on the knife and nicked herself, bits and pieces about the drugs that were put in the cup that she drank that night. When it comes time to go to trial, if the jury hears a bunch of circumstantial evidence, and if you still got another suspect or person of interest like Larry Allen, who has just committed this violent crime against the same person, there's that reasonable doubt in the jury's mind. We needed to get the confession. But at this point, I'm frustrated, getting nowhere with the interview, so I decided to leave the room.
I should have never done this.
All right, give me a minute.
I feel pressured to get the confession and make sure that it's done the right way so that it's a prosecutable case.
The detectives told me, we will call you as soon as we have someone in custody. They said, we will have this settled by the end of the night.
I wanted so badly to do right by her and to get that closure.
Hey, buddy, come here for a second. Just leave all that stuff right there.
We were going to collect his clothing to see if there was trace evidence. So myself and another detective gave him what's called a Tyvek suit, which is a white, like hazmat suit. I was very polite to him. Yes, sir, no, sir. I'm sorry. I apologized to him for not being able to call his family. And he said, can I talk to you? I had no intentions of doing a secondary interview with him, but if somebody is wanting to talk to you, never shut down that interview.
I never would have that. Oh, I don't doubt that one bit, Hoss. I don't doubt that one bit, okay? I really don't.
I just wanted to be empathetic for him. And I knew that his family was very, very important to him.
And I can see in your eyes. You love your family. You love your sister very much. And I bet you $5 right now that you're ashamed. And you're ashamed about bringing this upon him, aren't you? Right?
Yes.
Okay, let me tell you something. There's no old saying, truth will set you free.
He's starting to cry a little bit. He's starting to show a little bit of emotion. He's getting backed further and further into that corner. And of course, everybody's scooting up to the edge of their seat, just waiting.
Told me I'm not a drunk ass one, this and this and that. For some damn reason, I went in the kitchen. But I heard like, I don't know why. Can I just touch your neck and show you? Sure. And I stuck her in the neck. And I realized what I was doing. Somehow, hell, I dropped it. Then she asked me to give her some of her medicine to help her. So I gave her way too much.
Did you crush it up and put it in a drink?
Yeah, I thought that it would help ease the pain. And then she passed away.
I don't think that's the whole story. I got a text saying, ask him about the duct tape. We still had crime scene, people processing the scene at the house.
We did find duct tape, plastic bags, and hair stuck to the duct tape in a couple different locations inside the house.
When they found this duct tape, part of it was formed in the shape of handcuffs.
And so we began to piece together that the lines on her wrist looked like excess adhesive from duct tape.
All right, just a couple questions. What'd you do with the duct tape? What'd you use the duct tape for?
If I found in her hands.
Is she dead when you put the duct tape on?
But I did that after she had passed away.
He minimizes it by saying, I put it on her once she was already dead.
I think he is wanting to tell the truth, but he's not wanting to come out and say, yes, I killed her.
So she had duct tape on her hands. What else did you put duct tape on? Mouth. You put it across her mouth?
Yes. And I think I did on her eyes.
Do you put it across her nose?
I want to say yes.
Now we've got possible suffocation, and so I asked him about that. This was going to be a very difficult question because he still can't come to grips that he did the actual killing.
I'm going to ask you the hardest question I'm ever going to ask a person, okay? Yes. And this is a you to me, okay?
This is the real deal. We need a confession for the success of this case.
And I just want you to give me a plain, straight up, honest answer.
Yes, sir.
Did you choke her?
He finally tells us what he did to her. And I did not expect him to do something even worse.
Did you choke her?
I didn't choke her. What happened was after she was already gone and wanted to make it look like a break-in.
Eric finally started confessing and telling Captain Spearman what he did.
I put the tape around the neck to wear the bag on it.
Put a bag over her head?
Yes.
And then you put duct tape around the neck?
And she was already gone.
Okay. How did you know she passed away?
She was making some type of noise. It sounded like a snore almost.
Mm-hmm.
This confession was actually giving us the manner of death, suffocating her by putting duct tape over her and the bag and stuff with her being as heavily medicated as she was.
I just snapped.
Okay.
And I didn't realize what I was doing until afterwards.
Okay. Let me clear up just a little bit, okay? I think you're ashamed of what happened at the bank. But what happened at the bank kind of led to the rest of the evening.
Yes, sir.
Am I pretty close with that?
Yes. No, you're not close. You're right, sir.
Was he intending to kill her after he took the money? I don't know, but I think after he put that stab wound in her neck, he thought at that point there was no returning.
You crushed the pills, put them in a cup. She drank some more. She started to get sleepy. You carried her to the bed. You went back into the living room. And then she was making those noises. You went back into the bedroom. Put a plastic bag over her head. And then duct tape the plastic bag.
That, for me, says he intended to kill her. Why else would you tape a bag around somebody's head?
After he had figured out that she was dead, he went and busted out the window in the kitchen to make it look like the house had been burglarized.
I wanted to make it look like a break-in.
He then told us that he had actually driven her car around for a couple of days and had come back to the residence a couple of times to stay the night, even though Kimberly Allen was deceased in her master bedroom.
I believe there's a certain level of panic and remorse that he went through.
I feel very bad.
Oh, I do. I know you do. I know you do. I really do.
You don't understand. I feel really bad.
I can see. I can see it in your eyes. Okay. It's okay. It's all right. All right. Let's come on back in here. We'll do what we got to do. All right.
And that's what it's about, getting that confession. And we were able to have a resolution and have this person in jail in remarkably quick time.
The findings from the medical examiner were right on point with everything that Eric had told us, from the overdose to suffocating her to the stab wound in her neck.
That kind of takes all that reasonable doubt away from what a jury could think when it goes to trial.
After the confession, we were able to clear Larry Allen just by his alibi. He was out of town and had some witnesses that were able to confirm where he was at. The sad fact about it is you had Larry Allen out there who was a lot more violent.
I believe that the motive in this case is what it usually is in so many cases of murder, and that's greed. Obviously, if you pull a knife on somebody and you take them to an ATM, you're trying to get money from them. And he took the $420 from her and then used it to buy cigarettes and beer. What a waste of a person's life.
Today, the man accused in her death faced a judge.
An acquaintance of Allen, Eric Ellis, allegedly murdered the 45-year-old at her home on Branch Trail in Smyrna back in March. Police tell News 2 he apparently confessed to the crime.
Eric had asked to plead guilty, so that was a huge surprise. It was unbelievable.
Mr. Ellis is currently serving life with parole. I think he absolutely got what he deserved.
For me personally, this case in particular just kind of was worse than others, just because of what she had been through before.
Days before she was killed, she testified in a preliminary hearing in another case where she was the victim.
She survived a cruel form of domestic assault and rape in June of last year.
Her estranged husband, Lawrence Eugene Allen, was arrested and charged in that case.
We were satisfied that Eric wasn't going to really see the light of day anytime soon. But we were still focused on the fact that Larry still had not gone to trial. Our biggest fear was that Larry would somehow get off now that she's not here.
After reviewing the preliminary hearing tape and listening to her testimony, we decided this was a case that should go forward. It is very unusual to not have your victim in a rape case. We were able to use her preliminary hearing testimony, and we were able to play that tape. It was as if she was testifying from the grave and basically asking the jurors, give me justice. And the justice system worked.
Larry Allen was sentenced to serve 21 years for those crimes against Kim.
If telling her story helps one person, either to stop the cycle of abuse or to prevent this kind of tragedy or to even just get through it, then to me, that's now her legacy.
I love my Kim. Everybody will remember Kim for who she was. She loved life and she loved trying to help people. She'll never be forgotten.
For more about Criminal Confessions, go to oxygen.com.